Hi guys, welcome to episode 12 of Pea Puffer Kingdom. I'm Rob. Excuse the plastic pot in a tank, but I'm using that to feed the algae wafers to the ottos because they won't eat off the bottom of the sand. So today we are looking at aquascaping for your pea puffers, and what I've done is I've asked on Facebook groups, which I'll actually give a shout out to later on as someone suggested, so you guys can find these Facebook groups as well. I asked for people to send me pictures of their tanks and let me know about the size and the stocking of them, and we're going to look at their aquascaping. I'm going to talk about different things you can use for aquascaping, hardscapes, substrate, plants, and also according to what a number of pea puffers you have, what you can do with your tank. So without any further ado, let's get cracking.
So first up we have a 15-gallon Flooville Flex, and in this one we have 3 pea puffers. We've got 2 males and 1 female. There's 3 pandagar in here and cherry shrimp in here. Now the ratio of males to female, 2 males to 1 female, isn't ideal. It's similar to what I have in my tank. But I found in my tank, as I'm sure this person has as well, that if you have enough plants and you have a big enough tank, it can work out pretty well. I also love that in this one, there is Java fern attached to wood, bogwood, I believe it is. So that's a really great way for you to sort of layer up your tank and make it look natural. I personally use super glue to put the plants onto the wood. That's a good way of doing it. You can tie them on as well. And also there's lava rock in here. I love the natural look. I love the dark substrate used in it. And it looks like something that you would see out in nature, I think. And it just looks awesome. Really good effort here. And this is a really good example of what you can do in a tank, a smaller tank of about 15 gallons for pea puffers. So next up we have a 128 litre tank. I'm just giving different systems of litres and gallons according to what I've been given here by people who've entered the tanks. This has got 5 pea puffers, 4 Otto Sinkless, and 2 Ankerstrus plecos. Apologies for the horrendous pronunciation there. But this is a fantastic tank. I really love this. It's a really thick, luscious tank. It looks like spiderwood, lava rock, I think it is in the background there, and carpeting plants with light substrate. I think that's sand or fine gravel. This one looks so good. It looks really natural as well. Again, going with the natural look. The tall, grassier plants, the thick ones. I think it's Cambomba, I believe that's what it's called. The ones to the right-hand side there next to the spiderwood. Correct me if I'm wrong there. If anyone sees the plants I'm calling out wrong or want to point out some. I just think it looks really good. This is a good example of doing something that's it's got a lot of volume to it. There's a lot going on and it's just brilliant. So this is another 15-gallon Flooville Flex. You'll start to see some patterns here in how to aquascape for pea puffers. In this tank there's 3 pea puffers, 1 male, 2 females, 2 bumblebee gobies, 2 ottos, 3 armano shrimp, 2 silver beaks, 3 male guppies and a nearite snail. So the patterns you're going to see here is also the thickness of the plants. So even though this is a 15-gallon tank, there's so many plants in here. It's really thick, it's really lush. It's exactly what the pea puffers need. There's floating plants in here as well, which is something you can get. I think it's called water lettuce. I'm not sure if that's what's here, but water lettuce is a really good one that you can buy for the surface of your tank to float, and the pea puffers love exploring the roots. If you've got snails going down as well, it's a really good look. So this is another example of how to do a tank for 15 gallons. And I think I had light substrate in this one as well, light sort of grey sandy substrate. And again, this is another good example of how to do a tank. So I've been informed by the owner this is a 10-gallon tank and they will be upgrading to a larger tank as they've just bought me more pea puffers. So this has 5 pea puffers and 4 Otto Sinkless. So again, Otto Sinkless creeping up with the tank mates, as you'll see on my tank mates list video as well. It's interesting plants here. I really want to know what this massive pink Anubias looking plant is. It's probably not Anubias at all. But if anyone knows what this is, or if you're watching and this is your tank, feel free to drop that into the comments of what it is. Because I think it's actually pretty amazing. It looks cool. It kind of dominates the whole tank, but it looks amazing in the middle. You've got wood in the bottom right there as well. Sponge filter, which crops up a lot in tanks for pea puffers. It's really good for them for smaller tanks. And there's Java fen in here as well, and Anubias in the top right. Now, whilst it's only been placed there whilst it's a holding tank, I've got one as well that's huge now, that floats around in Anubias, and it kind of looks cool floating around. The massive roots as well, looks amazing. This tank is a 29-gallon tank. This has got 7 pea puffer fish and 1 rubber-lipped pleco. Now I love seeing pea puffers in bigger tanks like this that have got huge volume to them. You can imagine them in kind of a jungle almost. It looks really, really amazing. I love the use of the plants here. I believe that's Amazon swords in there with Java ferns. Correct me if I'm wrong, if this is your tank. Moss in there as well. Anubias, I think it's in there. Wood as well. And it's good scaping. You got a dark gravel there. And sort of darker blue background kind of really suits it. I don't know if that's just the lighting on the wall, but I think it looks really cool. It gives it a bit of a spooky feel as well. And I think it's cool in the way the gravel dips in and out. It looks very natural. Again, you can see here that plants is the main thing when you're looking at pea puffers. Getting a variety of plants as well for them to explore is a really important thing. And you're seeing that in this tank displayed really well. So here we have a 10-gallon tank. This has 6 female pea puffers, which is an amazing ratio. If they're getting on well, that's awesome. There's 2 Otto Cinclus in here as well. Again, another person who's got Otto Cinclus as tank mates. And I'm told this has 50 plus Neocardina shrimp. So if that's the case, that must be one hell of a tank to look at. I'd love to see that many shrimp rocking around with pea puffers. This is a really cool setup for this tank. You've got these massive, massive Amazon swords in the background there, draping over, creating this kind of looming effect over the tank. And I'm sure it's the first thing you're drawn to as well, is this amazing moss tree that's been created. I wish that I had the lighting on my tank to pull this off. Mine aren't quite strong enough, I don't think. But it's just so thick, so lush, so bright green as well. It's just one of the best things I've seen in a fish tank, to be perfectly honest. It's a lovely sort of natural look as well. You've got the sand substrate at the bottom, similar to what I've got. And what's really good here as well is you've got these huge plants, but it's also a good mixture of small and variety of small plants along the substrate as well. So it creates this multi-layered, varied environment for the pea puffers. Again, there's a sponge filter to the right-hand side, which is proving extremely popular in these small tanks, and this is just a great setup. So brace yourself for the stocking list on this one, guys. This one is a 75-gallon tank, and in this tank you have pea puffers, white cloud minnows, yellow tetras, zebra danios, tiger barbs, green tiger barbs, black coolie loaches, peacock gudgeons, bumblebee gobies, and corridoras. So bearing in mind this is a 75-gallon tank, and there's not actually loads of each type of fish. That's a good amount, especially for a 75-gallon when a tiny fish like that. I think clearly this works well for the owner, and that the peas are turning out to be pretty good community fish in this particular tank. So, I have to say, to start off with the aquascaping itself, I'm not usually a fan of fake plants, but I think this is one of the better ones I've seen. You've got the purple one there adding a bit of colour, well, a lot of colour obviously. The red one to the right. I love the woodwork in there where it's placed. The plant placement's really nice. I'd maybe add a few more to make it a bit thicker in areas for the pea puffers. But I mean, if they're happy as it is, then you maybe don't need to do that anyway. And yeah, I think there's a lot of space in there, open space for them to swim in, which is nice. Sand substrate, which is similar to mine, kind of whiter on this one, so it makes it a bit more crisp finish to the tank. And this is a good example if you want to use fake plants, if you've got fish that maybe would destroy plants in with the pea puffers. I think this is a good example of what you can do with that. Okie dokie pig in a pokey, moving on to a 10-gallon tank here. In this tank, the owner has 1 male pea puffer and 1 female pea puffer, so I'm wondering if you're looking to breed the pea puffers here. I'd love to try that myself actually. In with these 2 pea puffers are 13 yellow shrimp. Again, this is another person with lots of shrimp with their pea puffers, so I'm wondering whether they can breed enough that even with the pea puffers picking them off that they can sustain the numbers, which is maybe something I'd like to do in my tank. That's really interesting. So with the aquascaping, as you can see here, really nice piece of spiderwood, and you can see why they call it spiderwood, long spiring sort of legs coming out of the base of it. Another use of lava rock to the right hand side there, which looks really great, always adds a nice touch to the tank. I believe that's moss on the left hand side, this last long grassy plant. Can never remember the name of it, but I've got one in my tank. Looks great as well. The dark substrate looks really good against the rock as well, and the plants really stands out and everything kind of pops in this tank. Again, it's a nice natural look. In the tank here we have a 10-gallon tank. There are 2 female peas and 1 male pea puffer. So that's the perfect sort of combination you want really. That way you're not going to have so much territorial fights. The male's got his 2 females. He's loving life. It's great. Also in here there is 1 dwarf crayfish, which I'd love to get in my tank actually, but I've got too many, I think, peas to him to be safe in there. But this is a really nice looking tank. It's simple but effective. You got nice sort of white, light sand, I believe there. Black pebbles, gravel on top as well, substrates spread out to make it look a bit more natural. Got a nice bit of bogwood there, or driftwood I think it might be at the front. Really nice algae growing on that as well. I know some people hate algae in a tank, but I think it looks so good when it's on the piece of wood like that. It just looks really, really natural. Love it, absolutely love it. The Amazon sword plant in the background there, in sand, so it works in sand as well. And there's quite a few plants that do work in sand. It's the creeping something, that plant to the right there. I can't remember what it's called. I've got it as well in my tank. And that is another one that does well in sand as well as substrate. And it just adds a nice kind of wavy feel to the tank, adds a nice little bit of something extra to it. And again, you've got a sponge filter there, proved very popular for all these smaller tanks. Floating plants in here as well to add a really nice tank. This tank is a 57 litre Flooville Flex. It's got 4 Pea Puffers, 2 Otto Sinkless and 6 Amano Shrimp. So again, Otto's coming up, Amano Shrimp, again, I've had them myself, really good tank mates for Pea Puffers if you get the larger ones. Smaller ones will get picked off. But anyway, with the Aquascaping here, it's messy, but in a way that I really love. This is how I'd like my tank to be ideally. You've got a huge mixture of plants here. You've got Anubias, you've got Java Fern, you've got moss attached to the top of the spiderwood here at the top. Again, spiderwood coming up. It's a really great tool to use when aquascaping. 4 Pea Puffers, sand substrate, there's moss balls at the bottom, a couple more plants. It looks like possible Anubias Nano Petite potentially there as well. Again, it's a really good example of putting a thick amount of plants in there, varying it, and there's you also don't have to have loads of different types of plants in there. And this one is just a great example of that. So lastly, we have another 15-gallon Flooville Flex tank. This one has 3 Pea Puffers in it, 2 female, 1 male. So again, a really nice little ratio to have in a tank. And 6 grass shrimp, which you can see along the bottom of the substrate there. So I think, similar to one of the last tanks, what draws your eye immediately, and it should, is this massive looming tree over the whole tank. It looks absolutely brilliant. Love it. I really wish that I could get this to grow in my tank with the kind of masses of moss that are growing on. It makes it look so cool, so kind of almost creepy in a way, something like out of a movie. So this is something you can do with your aquascaping. You can super glue bits of moss to the wood and other pieces of wood to other pieces of wood. And then when that's dried out, you can then put it into the tank. Otherwise it's toxic in the tank when it's moist and wet. But when it's dried out, it looks great. A mixture of plants in the substrate here, smaller plants. I don't think it's carpeting plants, but a few mixtures of smaller species of plants. A taller one at the back there, adding a bit of colour, looks really, really nice. And again, this is such a good example of getting creative with your aquascaping. So you can have a mixture of plants, and I think if there's 2 females, 1 male, the lack of sort of thickness and masses of plants is fine. So guys, I hope you found that video really useful, and as promised, here are a few Facebook groups that I find very, very useful. So the first one is Pufferfish Enthusiasts Worldwide. That's a really good group, very knowledgeable, really nice group to talk to and ask questions for. And the next one that I use is Pea Puffer, as in the big, massive pufferfish, Pea Puffer and Freshwater Puffers. That's all one title. Pea Puffer and Freshwater Puffers. That's a very knowledgeable group, and you can get regular replies on that as well pretty quick. The one that I use most, and probably most obviously, is Pea Puffer Owners. That's a really good Facebook group for finding out things, for sharing pictures of your tanks, for finding out, what's this condition that my fish might have, etc., etc. So, I hope you've enjoyed that video. One of the things that crops up a lot is the plants in this, so I hope you take away that there's been a lot of Amazon swords in here. There's a lot of moss in there as well. Anubias Nano Petite, a few carpeting plants in there too. Spiderwood is a massive thing that's used in Pea Puffer tanks because it just looks so sensational and can be creepy, can add something massive to the tank. And also the fact that you can super glue moss, as we've seen, to wood to make trees that look absolutely epic in tanks, and you can get really creative and create something that's really unique to you and represents kind of your personality within a tank as well. So if you've enjoyed this, and I hope you have and found this useful, do subscribe if you haven't already, like and comment. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.